Hey everybody, so I'm back for another Heresy Hump Day. Sorry it's been a while. Definitely have missed a couple of episodes. Life and things, even hobby things, life things have gotten in the way, but I am trying to get this one out for a true Heresy Hump Day for the middle of the week. So today I have a number of different topics. I've got a general channel update. I thought it'd be a good time to have just a dedicated topic of just talking about kind of what I'm doing as far as painting projects in the near future, coming up to the holidays, various things. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that and just talking about gaming as well. And then I do have a couple of, that's going to be a big portion of the video today, but then I have a topic, just how giant and or otherwise scale creep. And so I have some thoughts on that and discussion on that today as well. I have a sort of another esoteric, really esoteric topic today. Past, present, future focused. And so almost sort of a behavioral or philosophical topic today on that. So if you guys are interested in that, that's going to be the end of the video. So I do have a sponsored alcohol for this evening. It is this evening. Today I have the Cooper's Choice. So it is a little chilly out here today. I'm enjoying having a little bit of a nightcap while I do a little bit of painting on the chat today. This one is a single malt scotch, and it is by Glenrothes, which is one of my favorite scotches. This is one of their higher shelf items. I got this as a gift for my wife. It's got sherry finish. It says distilled in 1996. This was bottled in 2014. It was aged for 18 years. And I guess they list the cask on it, but I guess there was 360 bottles from this cask. So this is a limited run. Speyside, for those of you who don't know, for Glenrothes, it's a Speyside region scotch. So we'll have a quick taste of this. I have already poured it. I've got my little fluted scotch glass here. I wouldn't have had it for at least a year, I'm guessing. That's very nice. I really like this one. The last time I had it in close proximity with their standard Glenrothes, I kind of liked... I really like their regular Glenrothes enough that I don't really need to have the top shelf, to be honest. This is really nice, although, you know, I'm not going to pretend to... In this case, it may be a little wasted on me because I don't really notice much of a difference, to be honest. I like both of them quite a bit, but not enough to justify a real difference, to be honest. I don't know if you guys ever feel... I mean, that can be almost anything, right, as to whether or not it justifies to get that top shelf in some cases. I really like the standard Glenrothes. It's one of my favorites, and so I'd be just as happy with that, actually. And this one's quite good, too. So, painting update. What I'm going to be working on today is I'm back on the Tidewater home from Charlie Foxtrot Models. I have some windows that are still need to be done. Like I guess this side is done. But as you can see probably from here, is the bottom row here is not done. They're not as gleaming. Looks like this side is done. But then the back is primarily not done. I just have one window. So I kind of left it like that. When I had extra paint and I was just finished with the window, I did do, in some cases, start on the porch, like the pillars and things. What I'm going to do, though, because I can't really do detail work and do a Heresy Hump Day at the same time, if I get white on this blue, I'll have to like get to the water and be splashing it off and stuff. I like to be really concentrating just on that when I'm doing it. So I'm going to just get the base coat today on the brick. And so I've got just some, I'm using a burnt red, and I'm just going to put that on the brick around each side of the building, and then most likely the chimneys as well. So one little, unrelated to the painting update, one little thing I want to mention is, for those of you that may have noticed, I had to update my software for my editing for the channel, and because I had to load a new version for Windows 10 of the same software that I had some different settings preset than what I normally use. So when I actually uploaded my last video for the simians, there was some clicking in the audio. For those of you that noticed that, I apologize. I found it really annoying. The first time when just watching it while I was editing, I didn't notice it, but when I was sitting and done on my laptop, I noticed it, and it kind of bothered me. I didn't think it was enough to just completely take the video down, but I did find it bothersome. And so I apologize about that. I have actually corrected that in the system and tested it since then, so that won't be an issue anymore. So, as far as painting update, besides working on the Tidewater home again by Charlie Foxtrot Models, I am also working on the Mammoth, as many of you might have seen from my last update. So I'll be working on those two just over the next little bit. And then after that, it's a little up in the air as far as I kind of have I know which sort of projects I'm going to be working on, and I kind of have an idea of which order, but timing-wise, it's a little iffy, and part of that is because I am going away on the 21st of December for Christmas until New Year's. And I'm going to visit my parents in Asheville with my family, wife and kids, and we haven't been there in a little while. We usually go every other year, but I haven't been there in, I think, 3 years. They've had visited out here since then. And so I am really looking forward to that, but that's going to definitely, I'll be gearing up towards that. So I'm not really sure how much I'm going to get done before then, because that's only like 3 weeks. So I would like to think that this would be done, and the Mammoth, for sure. But to say that I'll get like 2 other projects done, or even or one besides that, is a bit of a mystery at this point, and I'm not going to worry about it a whole lot. I've felt really good about the amount that I've gotten done since the month I took off in July. I actually came away from painting, from that vacation, or from just doing hobby stuff, taking a break for that month, and I was really energized and very positive. Instead of it being one of these things where by taking the break you just sort of stop, like you have no drive to do it anymore, it was quite the opposite for me. I was actually like, I can't wait to get back to it. Like, I can't wait to start another project. Well, I really got a lot done in my mind for what I was aiming for, and I have no problem with now taking some time off for Christmas, and it's not really going to be like a month away, it's just going to be the holidays. When I do get back, I have to work a bit of a stretch, and so I won't be really starting to do hobby stuff too much. Even when I first get back, I'll be kind of working, kind of covering, like doing New Year's for others that are working during Christmas and things like that. And so if I get a little bit done during that time, that's great. If not, that's fine too. But I suspect I'll be sailing into the new year wanting to do lots of projects, just like I was after July. Now, as far as like other specific projects that I'd like to do, either start before I finish or what's really next in the pipeline, after what I just mentioned, not in any really specific order, but I want to do some Saga. For those of you, some of you may remember I did that unboxing for the animals and the sort of townspeople, like the peasants and townsfolks and various different civilians. Well, I haven't painted that yet, and I really want to paint that, and so I wasn't sure whether I was going to paint them as a box separately, like just do the animals, then do the townsfolks. I was also thinking maybe I should just, for fun, just do it as like a group of people and a group of animals that made sense with them. So like the sheep herders and the sheep. And so I kind of thought I might do that too. The only problem with that is if I don't batch paint and I just prime and set up, like just, let's say, the sheep and the sheep herders, it will take me a lot longer to get finished because I won't have all that other stuff ready to go, and I'll view it as a whole bunch of mini projects rather than two. And so I'm thinking I might just do them as boxes, just to be efficient, even though it might be fun to do it the other way. And so I might just start and just do the animal box. I am really excited about the next edition of Saga coming out, so I am kind of gearing up a bit for that. I have a warband of Scots that I'm going to be doing for Saga 2nd edition. Like, that's going to be what I'm going to be painting them around, is the second edition release. And so that will be happening like around the time of the release itself, but I'd like to get some of this Saga scenic stuff done in the meantime. And so that's really, I still have some time to do that in my head, but I want to, just because I haven't painted some Saga in a little bit since those Flemish mercenaries. But one thing I do have a little bit of a timeline on, so it's going to also be one of the next projects, is a couple of my friends and I are doing a Mordheim campaign, and we're supposed to start in January. And so I have a Beastman Mordheim crew, or troop, I guess gang, I don't remember what they're called, but and so that's the faction that I have, and they're the actual ones they released for the game, so it's not like I'm using other ones, which is fine too, but I did actually get a set that was released for Mordheim, and I'm really excited about it because I actually have the Minotaur and the Centaur and the Hounds. Like, I have a lot for it. It's fairly somewhat complete, if not complete. I think the only thing I don't have are the Bestigors that were released for Mordheim that are not part of the starter pack, and so I might pick those up at one point, but I have plenty right now. And I may even have those. Maybe I'm wrong. I have to take a look again. But I definitely have Ungors and Gors and the Chaos Hounds and the others that I mentioned, and the leader and things like that. And so I'm really excited about doing that, because part of it too is it's going to be a little bit of a primer for my Old Hammer painting of my Beastmen that I've purchased. Like, when I just do the general Beastmen for the Warhammer Fantasy. So I'm going to be experimenting with some different fur tones. I usually say skin tones. In this case it's Beastmen, so I'll say fur tones. And so I'm really kind of excited about that. Beyond that, I do want to do some Savage Core terrain. The next stuff, as I said, I'm going to be painting are likely going to be the Neanderthals and some of the special characters. But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing some terrain. Because in the new year, I would say that Mordheim and Savage Core are probably two priorities for painting and gaming. So, what I wanted to, so that's really like my painting update. Now I typically will do like a table down and show things that I'm working on, but I kind of showed that stuff because I've just been working on the simians that I showed in the video recently, and I've kind of showed already the mammoth. And there's not as much to show. I've already showed where I'm at kind of with the building when I stopped it. And so I don't really have like a table update really to show. I'm just kind of painting along today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about gaming, and I have a bit of an update with that. I've played 2 new games recently that I really, really enjoyed. And so one of them is DBA, so a historical game that's been around for a very long time. And another one is Dragon Rampant, which is sort of the like a sequel or expansion to Lion Rampant, which is historical as well, but it just focuses on the fantasy side. And I'll talk about the DBA first. I've heard of DBA before in the past, and it I knew that there's been a group in Calgary where I live that's actually played DBA at the local gaming club for many years. They're a fairly established group as far as I know. I have not attended, but I have friends that have attended. I have one friend that also has been a part of the group for many, many, many years. So, really long-standing member. And when I say, I believe that this group is likely 10 to 15 years at a minimum, like closer to 15 probably, if not more, been playing DBA in the Calgary area. It could even be longer, but I know that it's at least that. And so, recently, I had the opportunity, I asked a friend to play it, for him to teach it to me and play it. And one of the things I just start with, for those of you that don't know about DBA, it has like one of the coolest names of a war game ever. The first time I actually not heard about it but asked about it was when I was actually on one of the Tabletop Commanders chats, and I've only been on those chats maybe 3 or 4 times, but the first time I was with Ian and Curtis, I believe, and I know it was those 2. I don't know if there was anybody else that day. I think it was, at least at one point, it was just the 3 of us talking. And so, Dashaville and Curtis, we were talking, and he had mentioned, we're just talking yada 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 about games and stuff, and he's like, yada 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 DBA. And I'm like, DBA, what is that again? Like, what does that stand for? And he actually sort of paused for a moment, and then he said, kind of, with a small smile, he said, De Bellis Antiquitatis. And so, and I was like, whoa, I was like, okay, I was like, that sounds really cool. In my mind, I was thinking, like, the way that sounds, it almost sounds like you could cast a spell with the name of that game. And so, the funny thing is when I played recently, it'd been so long since I actually looked into the game, and I just finished my first game of it, and I asked my friend what it was called again, what it stood for, and then he kind of paused for a second, had the same exact smile, and said, De Bellis Antiquitatis. And so, the funny thing with DBA is, I think when you start playing DBA, you get to play a game that has one of the coolest names of any war game. It just sort of rolls off the tongue and sounds like something mystical because of the way, I'm assuming that that's Latin, but I thought that was really funny that 2 people completely not in the same circle of friends, like one through YouTube, one local, both had like the same expression and both it rolled off their tongue the same exact way. It was just really funny. And so I played, I've actually had 4 games of DBA. Now they actually go kind of quick, and that's kind of one nice thing about it. It's a really, really elegant rule set. I compare it in some ways. Even though it's nothing like Star Wars X-Wing, when I play Star Wars X-Wing, because of the movement templates and the way the game is set up, you really feel, in my opinion, when you play it, it's kind of an elegant system. The movement and the way the ships move and the way everything's placed is very kind of precise. And in some ways it's kind of fun for that, in that way. At least I find it fun when the game is elegant and it's just, very appealing. And I found DBA, it's played on a, I guess it's the exact measurement's not 2 foot by 2 foot. It used to be. It's a little bit bigger now. But it's sort of like a very confined space. I think it's like 30 inches by 2 feet or something to that effect. We played the 3.0 rules, the recent rules. And I just found everything was just very orderly and precise. Like the way you moved, was a lot of precision. And really that's kind of what drives the game in a lot of ways. It is actually, you need to have that level of precision in what you're doing for it to really be what it is. And that kind of appeals to me. I kind of liked it. Now, the other thing I found about the game is that it was very strategic. In some ways, it appears, as somebody that's new to playing the game, it appears like the game has aspects to it that could be considered simple and straightforward. And then it has aspects to it and the strategy and the number of combinations of different kinds of units that come into play and how they relate to each other, and just the sheer number of combinations you can actually run into can generate like quite a bit of complexity in how you're going to approach the strategy of the game. And so I found there myself at times just looking at everything as it unfolded in front of me and how things change. So I found how your plan really changes very quick based on what your opponent does. That's a general concept for wargaming, but in this game it has kind of a different meaning compared to some games that I play. But I found it really enjoyable. The first time I played, I only got one game in because I was just sort of learning the rules and listening to just how the game is played. But then it was pretty easy within an hour and a half of gaming to get 3 games in the second time I played. Now I still am kind of a noob and I don't really know by heart how different units affect other units. I have more how the actions work and some of the basics of what I can do with the units and what to expect as far as how different units support each other. That became much easier for me after playing it a bit more. But I really, really enjoyed it. Now, I could really see DBA filling a niche for me where you're playing simulating mass battles in sort of a very strategic, defined set of rules, clearly defined, but also a very fast play game where you can just kind of meet with someone to do some gaming and be able to get one game in very fast, but even to get multiple games in with less setup time and a lot less pressure to just pack, to set up and to unpack, and just the length of the game itself. And so I actually was really, really happy with that. I'd be interested in some of you folks that have played DBA and your thoughts on it. Now, the other game that I played, I've had for a little while, Electronica before, and that's the Dragon Rampant. Now, I've wanted to play that because I wanted to try out some of the miniatures that I have that are not necessarily the most current ones for Age of Sigmar, closer to Old Hammer. And I really liked how the Dragon Rampant rules allow you to pretty much use whatever miniatures you have. You're basically assigning, I'm assuming in Lion Rampant, you're assigning a category type to a unit, and they basically have a certain number of strength points, essentially. And so you can really use anything to represent, and at least in Dragon Rampant, where you might have more single models at times, like giants and things, they even, you know, tell you how to deal with that. Like, you can have, like, the common strength points are like 6 and 12, for what I remember. I've only played it once so far, but in those strength points, you can have, let's say, like 3 ogres that are, let's say, 6 points, and you just remove an ogre after every 2, as opposed to just having 6 models and removing 1 each. Or you can even have 1 and just have a die and remove it. Now, one of the things I really, really liked about the game, I mean, the obvious that I've already talked about is that I can choose whatever miniatures I want. Kind of, there's a lot of creativity in creating your army. You can pretty much represent things the way you want, which is great. You know, you can create your own narrative for your own army. You don't have to worry so much about a strict list from a company as to what you can take. So I really like that. But what that led to very quickly, because it has a system where you have to roll to get your units to do things. Now, it's not the only game that's like that. I have other games where you may not be able to do what you want to do, get your units to do what you want them to do. And what I always find that does is that it always creates, like, a story, whether you like it or not, whether those units, you know, do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. It inevitably will create a story about something happening that you didn't expect. And that did happen in the game. Like, I used goblins, and it was just very easy for me to pull my AOS stuff out initially to try the game. And yeah, like, my leader, which were who was within a group of wolf riders, was just not moving in the beginning of the game. And whereas my opponent was undead, and we already had a story that basically this goblinoid army where I had some wolf riders. We did a very small game, just a giant. I used an old hammer giant, like my old hammer giant that I painted, some wolf riders with my goblin war boss in there, and then just a regular unit of 12 goblins. And it was basically a story where that group went into a town to terrorize it. Little did they know that there was a necromancer in the graveyard, and, like, you know, that was sort of their town, and they got really aggravated at that invasion, and so they came out to meet them. And initially, all of, like, my goblins were just not really confused and not knowing what was going on, like, when they saw the undead. And when I say that, it wasn't because of some sort of psychology roll. It was just because they weren't doing their actions. It just developed a narrative, which was kind of cool. And the undead just slowly approached without hesitation and made all their action rolls. Once their wits came about them, particularly my giant, but they did actually pretty well, and ended up winning. And it was, you know, even other things created a bit of a narrative. I mean, for those of you that know the game, the undead have a courage of 0, which means the only way they can run or become not animated, you know, is by actually getting negatives when they do their courage rolls. And because the giant did such devastation in the beginning to them, he did get the unit to actually go into the negatives on their courage roll. And literally these skeletons either ran or crumbled to the ground in the face of the giant, which isn't supposed to happen easily, right? So, like, a little story basically happened, which was kind of cool. I really enjoyed it. I felt like you can, by taking any kind of models you wanted, the rules were very simple and straightforward, very much a fast play game. And then this, like, story's happening all around you when you're playing it. Or I should say, in the game, it's just being generated. And so I thought it was really, really fun. I really enjoyed the game, had lots of fun, and I'm playing it again this week. And it's going to be a little bit of a bigger game. And I honestly, after having read the rules, and even after just playing it once, I think that Dragon Rampant could very well be the fast play set of rules I'm going to use for my Old Hammer miniatures. Because I am planning on using both 3rd edition and 6th edition for my Oldhammer miniatures, Warhammer Fantasy, in particular 3rd edition. But for that, for me, it's not so much to go down somewhere and have a quick game. It's either, if somebody wants to play 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy, I envision it's either going to be, hey, do you want to on Saturday, set up a game for 3rd edition and just have some fun and take some time and do it. And you could do that, but I also see it for a lot of solo play opportunities. I'm looking forward to just having an ongoing 3rd edition game happening in my basement, just to solo play it. And so, I don't want to kind of go into solo play as a discussion or the whole meditative aspect of solo gaming and long-term gaming, but it's kind of like having that chessboard set up, like in Blade Runner. Where it's just an ongoing chess game. Well, in this case, it's, a solo game, but it's just like having that story unfolding and just some sort of little game happening, exploring the 3rd edition rules, and so I'm planning on doing that. But I also kind of need a fast play game that I can use those miniatures and play quick games of fantasy and that are really fun. And I think Dragon Rampant is really, really good. I think it could very well be it. That's it. For those of you that either play Lion Rampant or Dragon Rampant, what are your thoughts on it? It doesn't seem to be the most complex game, and I know sometimes you definitely want complexity, just for what I was just saying, with 3rd edition and things like that. There's a beauty that comes in having complex games with lots of detail that allow you to really enjoy the precision or the demands for precision, or even just the narrative that develops through precise rules and detailed rules. Because there's a narrative that's different than what I just described. In my experience, it's different when you actually have, let's say, a chart for a hit location or lots of psychology rules with rules that have to happen at certain times. The story can develop that way as well, through not just randomness where you fill it in because something didn't happen, but the actual rules themselves can actually be made to generate a story. And so that's kind of interesting too. I have to do a little bit of the details there, but I have to go to a smaller brush. So I'm actually going to move towards my roof for a moment and paint the chimneys while I still have the big brush out. So, now that I have the gaming and painting sort of update done, I'm not going to talk about Savage Core and Mordheim at this point yet. I haven't really played them. I am looking at the rules, and there are games that I'm going to be playing in the future, but I don't have really much to say on those yet, and so I'm just going to keep with the current ones that I've just played. So what I want to talk about now is just how giant or scale creep. Now I want to make a disclosure before I start the conversation, in that I like large models and majestic looking models as much as the next person. And so I love the look of the Forge World Giant. That, for those of you, I think it's called Bone Crusher, but it's huge, really cool looking. I had thoughts already of getting it to be next to my goblins for AOS, and just love it. I mean, I really do. So I don't dislike large models. And having a large model has nothing to do with whether it looks good or not. Models can look really good, both large and small. Really has very little to do with it, in my opinion. It's more, they can be kind of majestic looking and much bigger, and have a huge presence because of their size, but it doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with how good they look. Now, with that said, Many of you will probably know or seen how in many games, particularly Games Workshop games is a reference point for me, there's been sort of a size creep, a scale creep in miniatures over the years. Whether, let's not even talk about the Primaris Marines, which are they're sort of deliberately bigger, like they still have the regular Marines, so I don't really consider them at this point to be relevant to this subject, although eventually they may, many people feel they may replace regular Marines with them, in which case it'll be completely applicable for the topic. But even if you just look at regular Marines, they've gotten bigger over the years. And if you look at things like giants and ogres and other things, it's even more apparent. Minotaurs, I mean, you look at the original Minotaurs and then you look at like the Minotaurs today, and it's just tremendously different in size, the size differences. Now, I'm going to step away from the gaming part of the discussion for them for a moment and go towards the comic cinema and bring up the Hulk just as a reference point of this discussion. Because I'm not just talking about gaming here, I'm also talking about just perception of size and how intimidating that is and how they use that in both cinema and how that then translates to the gaming hobby. Now, I'm going to throw a little picture up here. When the Marvel game was out, I was quite interested in people's thoughts on the size of the Hulk, based on the Hulk model that had come out. I'll throw a picture of that up too, for night models. Now, depending on... I've had this discussion on the channel before, so I'm sort of revisiting it for this, just for this topic, just as a point again. The Hulk has been listed as, really anything from 7 foot to like 11 foot as far as standard size. People that are, the way he's depicted in the comics and things. Now, many of you that are fans of Marvel will know that the Hulk is supposed to get bigger in size based on how angry he gets. So you can make the comment in the comments below how the Hulk actually gets bigger based on how angry he gets, so it's all really not relevant and such. But despite all of that, there is a listing on the Marvel database that says something like 7 to 8 feet, and there are, times when he's been drawn upwards of 11 feet or more. It's clear, you can look throughout the comics, he's just much bigger than 7 feet, twice the size of a person. Even in the movies, at times he's shown as being that big. Now, in order to sort of justify that the Hulk really should be like he originally was, like, smaller at around 7 feet, somebody put this picture up. And it is kind of an interesting picture because it shows what is supposed to be a man that's around 7 feet, but also quite bulky, like blown up to 7 feet, but also kind of wider too, which the Hulk would probably be even wider than him, because he's not just lean and lanky. But he's quite huge. And when you see this guy, like, who's probably somewhere between 5 and 6 feet tall in the photo, he looks like the Hulk, the guy that's behind him, like that's like supposed to be like 7 feet. He looks like a juggernaut. I mean, he's tremendously huge. If a guy like that existed in real life, they probably does. There's probably people. I know there's people more than 7 feet tall, but I don't know how many of them are that wide and muscular as well. But like, strength is sort of exponential in size in that sense, in that if there was a guy that muscular and that tall and built like that, even though he might only be a foot and a half taller than many men around him, he likely could go right through 6 guys of the other size if he needed to. I mean, it would, what I mean by that is, like, in my experience, my opinion is that it wouldn't be easy for 2 men who have 12 feet of height between them to hold back one man that's 1 foot taller and proportionately wide in the way he is in the photo. And so it's interesting how perception of size is displayed, in fiction, and how people sort of take it even on the gaming table when everything's much smaller. Because, things are often 2 to 3 times the size, when they're trying to show something bigger than something else. Whereas this discussion I'm kind of showing here is, or trying to discuss, this discussion that I'm trying to discuss, this point that I'm trying to make is that it's interesting how a little difference sometimes can really show so much. If you look at some of the old ogres from GW, I'm just going to guess, just from having seen them, I haven't measured it, but they likely at times might only look like they're 2 feet taller than an average man, 3 feet, 1 foot, bigger, much bigger in their features and their size, because it's proportionate, just sort of like in that photo, but maybe only like 2 feet taller, certainly not double the height. But still, my perspective is that would have been pretty massive. Like, that the effect of that size, as in the discussion we were just having with this guy here behind the man in the photo, it likely would have been very, very massive. Now, another cinema example of this are giants. And for those of you that watch Game of Thrones, the men that they use to actually, in real life, the men that, from reading it, were like 8 feet tall that they used in the modeling, the computer-generated modeling. Now, they were clearly bigger than 8 feet tall when they were finished, but they used big people to simulate the giants on the show. And when you looked at the giants in Game of Thrones, I don't know about you, but they look so impressive and so intimidating looking. Now, those giants were meant to be on the show and in the books, like after they were finished with them, about 12 to 13 feet tall. These are giants. I felt the way they handled the inclusion of giants in Game of Thrones was really well done. When he was coming down the tunnel, that giant, and they were trying to stop him, like they showed like 6 or 7 or 8 guys, and I hope I'm not spoiling it, but things didn't work out well for the giant, but they didn't work out well for the guys either. And what they basically demonstrated is how there was a bit of an even match between a 12-foot thing and 6 6-foot things, or 8 6-foot things, something like that. 8 people versus 1 giant. I find, as another point of this topic, that in cinema, giants often are portrayed dumber the bigger they are. I didn't see the movie Jack and the Giant Killer. It's like a kind of a kid's movie that came out recently, but they clearly, in all of the artwork and everything I've seen of it, are not portrayed to be incredibly smart. I don't think they have to do that. Like, clearly they could make a movie with a huge giant that's very smart. But I don't know about you, but most of the time when I watch movies, the bigger the creature is, the less relevant it is to the storyline, and the less engaging it is. So I'm not a fan of Harry Potter, but for whatever reason, I think of Hagrid, because I guess his brother was a half-giant, is what my kids tell me, but he has giant in him, obviously. Big guy, but actually like a wizard and like extremely smart. But he's still of a size that he can stand next to other wizards and just be the biggest one there and very imposing, but not out of touch. It looks really impressive, but it's still immersive within the story. Whether or not that, how... I think that is relevant to this discussion on scale creep for these things. So, by the way this discussion's going, you can probably tell that I'm a little biased in this, in the sense that I'm thinking that at times there's a use to not making things too big, and not really needing to show that something's like so much bigger just to show that it's more powerful. I mean, because really it's just all about perspective. Again, having said that, I love the big models too. They can be very cool. I love that demon that I did last year, and it towers above that Eldar that it was slashing down at. And it does show an awesome majesty to it. I didn't get a sense that that demon looks stupid just because it's big. But I did. But I do think that that principle tends to bleed into this sometimes. So I find it funny how you kind of trap yourself. In some ways, once you make things bigger, there's just no going back, right? And so, like, GW could never release giants and ogres that were of the size that they had in the past, because they've already really went past that line. You could create half giants, I suppose. Just call it something different. Instead of having Primaris Marines in Age of Sigmar, we'll have half giants. Everybody will want to come out and get smaller stuff than you can get currently. So it's an interesting subject to me. Like, I'm not trying to blame manufacturers for doing this, and clearly some people still have a preference for the older style, because there are smaller companies still making stuff that looks like it, because they know there's an appeal for it. Some of the artists like it themselves. But I thought it was an interesting subject, and I'm kind of interested. There are a lot of long-term gamers that subscribe to my channel. I'm kind of interested in what you guys think about it. It's almost like, can manufacturers be brave enough to not make the biggest giant today? Can you be confident enough to not produce the biggest ogre? So I just have to do the details on those bricks. And then oh no, I guess it's not just the details. I still have the porch to do. And then also those details around the ventilation points in the foundation of the building. I have one last topic today. I don't know how long I've really gone on for. I always say this, but it feels shorter, because I do have fun doing these. I feel like you guys are here while I'm doing it. Maybe that's why I find this so fun. Even though I'm just spouting off myself, I feel like my friends are here getting ready to reply or say something. And so, my last topic, I really hope not to weird people out with this. I know there are some folks that like the esoteric discussions on the channel, that are longtime viewers of the chats and things. I don't bring up some of these esoteric discussions to get on a soapbox or to think that I know how life is or how the world runs. It's purely my opinion, my observations that I'm sharing when I bring something like this up. I usually bring it because it's interesting to me, but I don't want to appear to people as if I think like a know-it-all or whatever. Particularly with a subject like this, because I just had a topic that just sort of, or a perspective, I guess I came to some realizations that are probably just common sense to most people, or not, maybe important, but just, not as revolutionary as they are to me in my thinking. And it's about, in our mindsets on a day-to-day basis, how much of our mindset is past-focused, present-focused, or future-focused. I definitely feel that in most cases, people are always a mixture of all three. And most likely everyone is to a degree present focused, because that's where we're living in, is the present. So clearly, like, you're present focused when you get up in the morning to brush your teeth and whatever. But sometimes with not only where you're thinking, but also where your actions are, you may be past focused or future focused rather than present focused in some things, and how a lot of your energies are put into things. Now, I wanted to start out with this idea that I think the common perception, the common sayings about the past, present, future, is that if you're past focused, I think there's a common perception that you're irrelevant, or you're in the past. It's like a negative association. So you're in the past, like, stop focusing on the past. You got to look towards the future. Like, these kinds of sayings are geared and generate that notion of the discussion. I acknowledge that. I don't think that that's wrong, and in certain instances to say that. That's one way of looking at it, but I don't think it's the whole picture, and that's why I'm bringing it up today. Because I would almost say that most of the time, or many times, as in the same way I just mentioned that past focus is looked at as a negative, present is looked at as more relevant. You're in the present here. You're in the here and the now. You're not in the past. You're thinking about what's important, what's right in front of you. But then, even more, don't just look at what's in front of you. Look towards the future. And so that's looked at as, even in some cases, a step better. But then, to flip the coin, some people will say, all you're thinking about is the future, but you're not smelling the flowers. Like, you're not actually paying attention to what's right in front of you. You're not enjoying life. You may be preparing for a future that never happens. Everybody's heard a story about the person that saved up their whole life for retirement, but then died the day after they retired, right? That's like just a story, or it happens to people, but it's not necessarily everyone or all the time, but it is a thing. And that's just one perspective on how it can be negative to be only future focused. So, let's talk about being past focused for a moment, and why I don't think it's always bad. Or I'm just going to mention how also I think it can be where you're at in your life too. One of the biggest reflections out of all this that I've had recently is just reflecting on how I've changed over the course of my life already. Like, I'm going on 45. I'll be 45 very shortly. And when I was younger, in particular college time, like high school, going into college, and then throughout college, and then to a degree, even after college, to a significant degree, I was very future-focused in my mind. Much of the stuff that I did when I was younger for enjoyment went by the wayside, and I really focused on college. I was really focused on my living situation, because I moved away from home. I had parents that moved to another side of the country while I was away at college. I had like no home base to go to. And I was all about survival in my head for the future and just how I was going to make sure I could survive and put food on the table one day and have a life for myself. Because I didn't come from a family that had like a family business. I had no trade. I didn't really come from a family that I was the first person to graduate from college in my family. And so it was sort of an achievement to go to college for me. I didn't have a lot of advice, but all the things, like I said, that I did when I was younger, that like things that I tend to focus on for like enjoyment, entertainment, various things, I wouldn't say that I consciously dropped them. Like I just lost interest temporarily in them, and I just became really focused on school and just temporary distractions that I could do like when I was in school, like, you know, but nothing really that I even remember. And at the time, I think it was really important. You know, it served a purpose. It made sense biologically, I think, you know, in some degree that I was, you know, doing what I needed to do. But I kind of not only stopped thinking about the past, but I went to college in the 90s. And honestly, although there was some music I listened to, for somebody, like I consider myself very much a music and a movie connoisseur, the 90s are almost a bit of a black hole for culture for me. Some people like really identify with music for when they were in college and things like that. I speak to people and they're like, yeah, like I remember this when I was in college, I love this, I saw this person, you know, in concert. For whatever reason, I found that decade, although I do have some music that I like from it and some movies, compared to other times, I almost have like a bit of a black hole, and because I was so focused on other things, which were not typical for me, you know, overall in my life, and so the present focus wasn't really there as much. It was mainly the future focus, a little bit of the present, and not much of the past. Now, when I was a little kid, I was all present focused. There was really not much of a past to think about, and I didn't really care about the future. But when I was like 8 to 17, 16, it was very much about the present and interests that I had at the time, friendships, and just everything, just enjoying exactly what was going on right then and there. Now, I'm at a point in my life now, it's been a while since I've been in college, like I've been out for a while, and there's been a transition. I've been future focused even in career and things that, even until recently, in recent years. There's been future focus. You know, I went back to school again at one point and got another degree, but I had some changes in my life where I made some decisions, career decisions, to scale back and focus differently. And over the last few years, you know, with going through some of the changes, I've started to have some past focus at times, and definitely present focus too, but with the nostalgia that I often have and I talk about on the channel, like whether it be movies and just various things, it's very much a past focus. Now, I've mentioned also on the channel that I have parents that are very much into like old cars, and for them, you know, they're part of a club, it's a social thing. They have a hobby where they, you know, will work on cars and restore them. They'll do charitable events with the car club for other people that have nothing to do with the club, like little kids and stuff like that, like people that need money. And they really enjoy it. Now, obviously they're older than me, my parents, but it's a past focus in some ways. Like it's like looking at the 1950s and the 60s cars, and it could be 70s, it could be 40s, but there's that period of the 50s and the 60s that seemed to be a big period for them, and they get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Now, is that sort of nostalgia and that looking to the past and enjoying it in your life a bad thing? I don't really think it is. I do think there definitely could be examples where you're too focused on the past and not enough in the present and the future, and it can be considered bad. And definitely at certain times of your life, I could see how it could be counterproductive. But I don't really think, having a portion of your focus that enjoys the past and appreciates the past. And you could even somehow tie this to history a bit. I mean, many of us that like history, many of you more than me that actually know more than, like from speaking with you, followers on my channel and who I follow your channels, just know a particular period of history that I don't, and just really well and enjoy it. You may have no personal attachment to that period, or you may, but like there can even be that piece that could be considered tangential to the discussion. And I don't think it necessarily has to be a bad thing to take comfort or to take enjoyment in those things. In the way I started out this discussion, saying how it's often focused on being a negative. And perhaps what many of you might comment and say or agree with is that at certain points in your life, it actually becomes better. Or not better, but like something that's normal and quite common. And I'm just sort of analyzing it, I guess, to some degree. But moving away from the past piece, though, because I've been talking about that a bit now, is I definitely think that it's very healthy to have a strong present focus, too. Whether you're looking, and this is my opinion, just purely my opinion, but whether you're looking towards the future or whether you're looking back and reflecting on the past, really understanding where you're at now and appreciating and living in the moment, I think is really valuable as well. And as much as I do really take enjoyment at things that are nostalgic, I've realized, I've talked to my wife about this times, and I've said, like, with having kids the age that I have, which are around 11, 13, going on 14, I've said to my wife, like, we have our health, we're working, we're doing okay, and we have our kids at this age living with us. And I said, like, this is probably the best time of our life. Like, I've said that, and that's like the present focus in me, actually saying, like that's where many of you might say, this is common sense, Palmer, but I think sometimes, for me, just acknowledging, like, this is probably the best time of my life right now. Like, I have a couple of periods in my life that I would call, like, the best times of my life, but I would actually say right now is one of them for sure. And so for me, that's the present focus, where it can be really healthy to really savor the moment and really, with your family, with your friends, with what you're doing, your career, whatever it is. And so I hope I didn't get mushy or too introspective on this topic, but I've just been thinking about it a lot lately, and I thought this might be one of those chats that I can put a lot of people to sleep with, or just one of my esoteric moments on the channel. But I'll leave you with this chat, as I finish this, with something that I always think about whenever this comes up. And many of you may have watched, because you either like cartoons or that you have kids, but you may have watched the original Kung Fu Panda. Well, the Grandmaster Turtle, Sifu, on that movie had spoken with the Kung Fu Panda, and it was one of his difficult moments. And he said some words of wisdom that I thought were really cool at the time and always made sense to me. And what they were was, I'm going to forget it here now. I might have to cut. But it was, I know it. The past is history. The future is a mystery. And the present is a gift. Okay, well, that's it for this week. Talk to you guys later.